The way we understand and consume retro games is very different to how the games were originally perceived. When a game released in the 90s, you'll hear about it either from a magazine, or an advert, from a friend, or just seeing the box in a shop and getting the game because it looked cool. Thanks to the internet, retro gaming has created a very different space for these games to now exist. While Super Mario 64 was a revolutionary step forward for games with the 3D graphics and open worlds, it's a game that has been discussed and continually covered for nearly 30 years. From it being the most speedrun game of all time, to all the different iceberg videos, which dissect and break down every myth and thought anyone has ever had about the game. People's love of these games keep them going, but when something exists in social spaces for long enough, it changes over time. Anyone who is 28 or younger was not alive when Super Mario 64 was released, but by engaging with content about video games online and watching videos about the game, they will have a certain perception of Super Mario 64. You don't need to play a game anymore to hook into what the game is all about and what people think about it. This isn't something that's new, but the internet has changed it, which I'm not criticizing, but I want to highlight how the way we interact with video games, including retro games, has changed. This probably feels like an odd tangent to start on for a ranking Simpsons game video. I think it's important though because there are already narratives about all these games out there that are easy for fans of The Simpsons to absorb. The general reputation is that the Simpsons games are just awful, and most of the early 90s Simpsons games are grouped together and labelled as bad. Bart vs. the Space Mutants had a big hand in this, where you have videos like the Angry Video Game Nerd covering the game and talking about how terrible it is. Another game that's regularly featured in the Discord about 90s Simpsons games is Bart's Nightmare. I've never played Bart's Nightmare, but I know about the game because of videos like the infamous Nostalgia Critic review, where he screams about it in a very unpleasant way. Bart's Nightmare to me feels like an internet punching bag. People play it because it's not very good and a bit weird, and seeing these types of videos is how I've experienced the game. Maybe Bart's Nightmare is a bad game, and its online reputation is correct, but the only way I'll know for sure so I can rank it is by playing it for myself. Let's go over some history before getting into the game. It's 1992 and we are still in the middle of the Acclaim era for Simpsons video games. 1992 has been a bit all over the place so far, with Konami releasing an MS-DOS platformer and Acclaim reskinning an Amiga game and adding Krusty the Clown into it, alongside with releasing a Game Boy exclusive minigame collection. We've reached the big release for 1992 now with Bart's Nightmare, which released on the SNES in October 1992. Bart vs. the Space Mutants got a lot of marketing, with it being the first Simpsons game, but it was still an NES game coming out in 1991, which was late in the NES's life cycle. With Bart's Nightmare, it was still the early days of the 16-bit era, so this was the first true next-gen Bart-themed video game. There's more advertising for this game than any other we've seen so far. You can feel how much Acclaim was pushing Bart's Nightmare as the big game for Christmas 1992. A proper Simpsons game for the new Nintendo console. We have a new developer stepping in for Bart's Nightmare with Sculpted Software. They're a studio that worked with Acclaim a lot, to the point where they were bought by Acclaim in 1995 and renamed to Acclaim Studios Salt Lake City. Sculpted Software worked on a lot of licensed games, including Super Star Wars on the SNES, and helped port games like Mortal Kombat. Looking at the games they worked on, they feel very similar to the other studios that worked on Simpsons games for Acclaim. They're so similar in fact that there's a game called Fight Night that released in 1985 that was worked on by Sculpted Software, Distinctive Software, and Imagineering, with each of them handling a different version of the game. Acclaim certainly had a type when it came to developers they worked with, sadly that type not being developers known for making great games. A commonly known fact about the development of Bart's Nightmare involves a game developer called Bill Williams. He had been creating games since the early 80s, and Bart's Nightmare was the last game he worked on before leaving the industry completely. There's a lot more to his story, but him quitting the industry gets lumped together with the quality of Simpsons games being low, and that feels unfair. Bill Williams had a complicated life, working on games, quitting that, and writing a book about his relationship with God before dying at the age of 37 due to a genetic disorder. Working on Bart's Nightmare is one part of his story, and him quitting I don't think has that much to do with the game specifically, and it feels like a much more complicated situation. If you want to know the full story of Bill Williams, I would recommend looking it up. As for today though, I'm going to be jumping in headfirst into Bart's Nightmare to see what I've been missing out on for all these years. We start off with a pink credit screen and quickly go through Bart running past the Acclaim logo, the Simpsons logo coming out of the clouds, and the title screen. This again quickly moves on to Bart doing homework in his room when it turns from day to night. Bart falls asleep only to raise his head again to see the pages of his homework get blown out the window. Bart climbs out the window after them only to fall into a dark void, which is him entering a dream world. After that, it's back to the Acclaim logo and everything loops. There's a lot to like with the start of this game. There's something quite special about seeing the Simpsons cloud scene in this game. We have seen it before with the Simpsons arcade and Bart's House of Weirdness, but I appreciate it in this game more. We haven't seen it in a console game yet. Despite there being lots of games on the NES and other consoles, none of those games had this Simpsons opening. Seeing it here with the Simpsons voiceover as well, it helps Bart's Nightmare feel like that next-gen Simpsons game. That feeling is something that Krusty's Funhouse didn't capture on the SNES, despite being released first. The title screen itself is just the box art, which looks pretty nice. We're back to green shirt Bart again. I thought it was a rare sight when I first saw it in Bart's House of Weirdness, but he had a green shirt on the cover of Krusty's Funhouse as well, and now he has it again in Bart's Nightmare. The opening cutscene is okay. It's nice seeing Bart's room and it does its job of setting up the game, I guess. My main complaint of all this is that it's a bit confusing. Things move too fast, and looping everything doesn't help. There isn't a proper title screen where it says something like press start to play. It just loops, which feels like an odd way to start your game. The music here is very different from anything we've heard before. It doesn't sound like The Simpsons, and doesn't make any effort to match the show, and I kind of like that about it. While it doesn't sound like The Simpsons, it does sound very 90s, which has its own charm to it. There's lots of bass in the soundtrack, which I'm all in favour of. Pressing start takes you to a brief scene showing Bart falling through the clouds to land in a street. This is where you take control of Bart in a more dreamlike version of Springfield. I'm going to describe my first experience playing this game, as I'm sure most people who played this had a similar experience to what I had. Okay, so after landing in the street, I found out I could spit watermelon seeds and could jump. The jumping felt pretty bad and awkward. I had no idea what to do, so I started going right. There are these floating Z's, but they seem to be set dressing as we're asleep. A letterbox comes to life and it knocks me down. I assumed I lost health, but I have no idea how to even tell. Jumping over the letterboxes seems to kill them, so that seems to be our main way to deal with enemies. I walked past a piece of paper, but barely even saw it. A school bus comes out of nowhere running me over, so I started walking on the sides of the road. Green floating Jebediah Springfield heads start showing up, and I did manage to kill one, but I got knocked down by another as I was still struggling with the jumping. I walked right for a good long while, trying to find something to do. I got knocked down again, this time by a basketball. A TV bowls down the street, followed by a fairy version of Lisa that turns me into a frog. The movement becomes even worse, and I fail to jump over a letterbox, causing everything to go white and the music to slow down. I hopped down the street some more until I saw Blinky. I tried to jump over him, failed, and that seemed to kill me. There's a scene of Bart waking up, a giant red F on a piece of paper, and then the whole Simpsons family looking very angry at Bart while they look at the F grade on the fridge. I reached a game over after 3 minutes of gameplay and achieved nothing. Ignoring the gameplay issues for now, this is not a good way to start your game. I get that this is a dream and things are supposed to be a bit disorienting and confusing, but this takes it too far. What was I supposed to do? What's the objective? How does the health work? Why did Lisa turn me into a frog? This game is quite difficult, so you can't have the fundamentals of the game and what you're supposed to do be so opaque. This isn't a problem exclusive to 90s Simpsons games. So many of these games from the time don't seem to care at all about how enjoyable your first experience is. If you fail straight away, who cares? You've already bought the game, and your parents aren't going to buy you another one. What are you going to do, stop playing? Game developers from the 90s must have known that people had to keep playing their games, even if the first few minutes were awful, and Bart's Nightmare feels designed around that idea. There's clearly a lot to figure out and discover in this game, so it's time for a second attempt. I had learned a few things from my first run. Avoid Lisa, jump over enemies to take them out, and don't stand in the road for too long due to the buses. Starting up the game again, I found another piece of paper but couldn't interact with it. It felt like I should be able to do something with this. I accidentally landed on it while trying to kill a basketball, which warped me to this view of Bart approaching 2 doors. Before I could figure out what was happening, Bart walked through the orange door. This took me to a level where Bart was dressed up as Indiana Jones with a whip, and I could hop across these different pillars. I died when jumping on a pillar with fire on it, and then I died again landing on a low pillar, showing me a screen of Bart asleep in his room with a pages collected counter, showing I didn't collect any pages. Okay, we're collecting the pages, so that's what we're meant to be doing. After being sent back to the street, I quickly found another page. Jumping on that sent me back to the doors, and I went through the orange one again to go back to the pillar jumping game. I did a bit better this time, only to be blindsided by Maggie shooting me with a pacifier, taking me back to the street. Everything went white, but I managed to kill a basketball which got me a skateboard. I immediately got run over by a bus, and it was game over once again. It was nice to make a bit more progress, but it's clear what type of game this is going to be. I needed more knowledge on the game, so it's my favourite time of playing any Simpsons game, and that's reading the manual. There's lots of critical information in the manual, like the Z's at the top of the screen is your health, and when it's all gone is when the screen goes white. You can recover your C's by using a bubblegum attack on the blue Z's. Not the red ones though, those are the bad Z's for some reason. With the manual now in hand, I can start playing the game for real, and we can start understanding and critiquing this game properly. Bart's Nightmare is a side-scrolling minigame collection. There's not enough platforming to call it a platformer. It's more exploring this street and playing different minigames. The street you start in is a bit like a hub area called Windy World. It's called that, I believe, because of the fan blowing the homework in the opening cutscene, and the pages are still being blown through the street. You're trying to find all the pages of Bart's homework, so you need to explore left or right to find them. Jumping on a page lets you play a minigame, which you can pick by leading Bart to one of the 2 doors. Completing the minigame takes you back to Windy World while earning a page, or if you lose, you're just kicked out. You lose the game and get a game over when you die in Windy World, and you're given a grade based on how many pages you've collected and your overall score. In the context of the SNES, this feels like a dated way to structure the game. The SNES was creating games that were bigger in scope, more epic with a better sense of progression to feel like you're really going on a journey. A Link to the Past gave you Hyrule to explore with a coherent story, or Super Metroid created a new genre about exploring a planet and the game expanding due to new abilities you could find. These were worlds to get lost in. These ideas started on the NES, but improved with the 16-bit hardware and really came into their own. It makes something like Bart's Nightmare, which is throwing yourself at a bunch of minigames and starting the game from the beginning every time you die, seem quite simple and almost lacking. Going for high scores with a minigame collection, it's always going to feel lesser compared to some of the more ambitious SNES games. However, because it didn't follow the trends at the time and is focused on this high score system, it makes it a more unique challenge nowadays. It being dated at the time almost helps it stand out as its own thing now. If you can get over the initial confusing nature of the game, it's easy to get sucked into it. You learn something during each run and you see your score increase, and eventually your grade at the end of each run improves. That's something I started to get lost in, and after a rough start it became a strong driving force for playing this game. What minigames was I going to find? What weirdness would I come across in the Windy World? And what tricks would I pick up to improve my runs? It might be too punishing, but it's all part of getting better at the game and getting further each time. I complained about Bart vs the Juggernauts as its structure was tied to giving you game overs by not earning enough money, but Bart's Nightmare fixes the problems that game had. Compared to Bart vs the Juggernauts, there's more freedom, with different ways playthroughs can pan out, and the scoring and letter grades are better at giving you something you want to chase. If you're willing to take the time, there's an interesting challenge here. What about the minigames themselves? Well, there's 5 in total to beat. It might not be fair to call them minigames, you could call them levels instead, but each one has unique gameplay which makes them feel more like minigames to me. Let's start with Bartman, which sees Bartman flying through the clouds. You fire your slingshot to take out enemies as well as obstacles like missiles and Krusty balloons. This level is littered with Simpsons characters, with Apu giving you health, Nelson flying past from time to time, and there are several bosses which are all characters from the show. Gameplay wise, there's not much going on with this one, but it's pretty enjoyable. It's a shoot 'em up, a basic one, but it's good enough as this one-off level. There's a nice pace to it, you're always doing something a little bit different, and I like how focused on boss fights it is. Barney's in particular stands out. He rides a pink elephant and burps green gas at you. I believe the connection between Barney and pink elephants is that Barney is a drunk, and pink elephants is used to show being drunk due to their use in the film Dumbo. The show would make this same connection between the two years later in season 10. There's a few annoyances with this level. You can only move in 8 directions, which makes getting through the poisonous gas a bit trickier than it needs to be, and the last boss against Mr. Burns in the plane is a bit boring. Tapping the fire button for the slingshot can be a bit tiring as well. Bartman isn't anything amazing, but it's fun enough and it's got tons of Simpsons references in it, so I quite like it. This is the first minigame I was able to beat, and after taking down Mr. Burns, you get one of the pages. I didn't beat this the first time I played it, and I had also failed at plenty of the other minigames before this, so this felt pretty good earning one of the pages for the first time. The next minigame I want to talk about is Bart's Bloodstream. Bart is scuba diving inside his own body, and you have to inflate evil viruses with a hand pump. This is a lot more abstract. With the Bartman level, you understand Bart having a dream about being a superhero flying through the sky. Swimming inside your own blood fighting germs? I'm less convinced this is a dream a kid would have. The manual even describes this one as being weird. They were almost proud of how strange this level is. After blowing up a few viruses, one of the pages appear protected by a barrier. While avoiding the viruses, you have to collect several Smiling Joe fissions to get rid of the barrier and get the page. If you get hit by one of the bombs that the viruses throw, then it's an instant fail. But outside of that, this one's pretty easy. It's the shortest minigame in Bart's Nightmare, and once you get used to the swimming controls, it doesn't take much to earn the page. I do appreciate how much easier the minigames are to understand in Bart's Nightmare compared to Bart vs the Juggernauts. Conceptually they're much more bizarre, but the controls are easy to figure out. For Bartman, you move and shoot, and for Bart's Bloodstream, you move and pump enemies. They can still take a few tries to find the best tactics, but at least the games are designed so you can understand the basics quite quickly. You're going to be confused due to all the strange theming and how this game presents itself, but at least you can control it. There's 3 other minigames to play, and early on I couldn't beat any of them. They're all quite tricky, but it wasn't the minigames that were ending my playthroughs, it was the Windy World. It was hard to play more than 3 minigames in a playthrough before I would die, and as I would fail at least one of the minigames, I was only getting a grade D- every time. The Windy World is a good idea, but has clear problems that can end runs in a frustrating way. The main problem is the jumping. You can jump straight upwards by pressing jump, or you can press left and jump at the same time to jump to the side. That's very standard, but you can only jump to the side if you press a direction when jumping. If you start jumping and then press left or right, nothing will happen, and your jump doesn't change. There's no mid-air control when you jump, it's fixed after you press the jump button. This is a horrible way to handle jumping. The timing for jumping over enemies is already quite strict, and not giving any mid-air control is a cruel choice. It's a limitation you can grow to get used to, but the game would have been improved with smoother jumping. They didn't even animate Bart when he jumps, he just launches into the air, which is how little they seem to care about jumping. Another gameplay problem that's a bit more minor are the trees. The trees closest to the camera can block your view, meaning you can take damage from something you couldn't see. This is cheap, and overall Windy World feels quite cheap a lot of the times when you get hit. The Jebediah heads hone in on you, and they're irritating to avoid, and so much random stuff appears on screen with most of it doing damage. When you just want to find the next page, the random nature of what can spawn in doesn't help. I still like the idea, and learning how Windy World works is all part of the experience of beating this game. Like how before when I got turned into a frog, the way you change back is by staying alive long enough to find a grandma who fires a kiss at you and turns you back into Bart. It can be hard to enjoy learning Windy World though, because so much would be improved with better jumping. This isn't about being too difficult, it just shouldn't work like this. Difficult games can have good jumping, but Bart's Nightmare is a difficult game with bad jumping that makes some of the difficulty feel artificial. The next game I was able to beat was Itchy and Scratchy. You run around the Simpsons house being attacked by Itchy and Scratchy as well as random household objects. You need to find a weapon like the hammer or fire extinguisher and use those to take out all the enemies in a room. It's similar to the Too Much TV level in House of Weirdness, but in that level you were taking part in an Itchy and Scratchy cartoon, with the levels based on actual Itchy and Scratchy episodes from the show. In Bart's Nightmare, this is more Itchy and Scratchy invading the Simpsons home, which isn't quite as appealing. It's the first minigame that I would describe as being bad. The controls are really awful. Bart is very slippery, so you slide all over the place. The slipperiness does feed into the chaotic nature of the level, but at the cost that it's not really fun to play. Enemies and projectiles appear very fast from either side of the screen, and some of these can kill you in one hit. There's a health meter and lives, but you burn through lives so quickly when Itchy runs onto the screen and blows you up in one hit. I think I can see what they were going for with this, trying to recreate the madness of Itchy and Scratchy, but this isn't the way to do it. The controls needed to be better and more responsive to stop this being annoying. The way I ended up beating this is that I found out that there are places you can stand in the level where none of the enemies can get to you. You can sometimes take out Itchy and Scratchy from there, or you can time dropping yourself down to attack them at the right moment. It feels cheap doing this, but this whole minigame feels cheap, so it's hard to feel too bad. This is a fun idea for a minigame, but the gameplay lets it down. Next up is Bartzilla, where you take control of a hybrid of Bart and Godzilla as you rampage through a city. This is another great idea. It's very weird in the right ways. It's taking full advantage of the dream setting of the game, and it was cool seeing Bartzilla for the first time. I like weird in my Simpsons video games. It gives fans of the show something unique that you wouldn't see in the show, with ideas that fit better for a video game. Well, there are the Treehouse of Horror episodes I suppose, but the video games still feel like a different take on the characters, which I like. The first part of this level has Bartzilla walk forward, where you destroy buildings and defend yourself from the military using lasers and fireballs. You don't move Bartzilla directly, he walks forward by himself and you press the D-pad to shoot fireballs and the face buttons to fire lasers. I didn't understand this when I first played this minigame, and I failed it because I was cancelling out my own lasers by pressing the D-pad so my lasers didn't destroy anything. This is an okay enough section. It's the easiest part of the entire game once you know how to use the fireballs and lasers. Getting to the end of this gives you a page. This is the first game where you can earn 2 pages instead of 1. The second half has Bartzilla shrunk down, and you have to climb to the top of a tall building, which is very similar to the Empire State Building. You have to avoid people throwing rubbish out of their windows, which includes Sega Genesis consoles, and a giant angry Marge version of Mothra that flies across. I again enjoy the weirdness of all of this. Mothra Marge was not on my bingo card of something to see in a Simpsons game. Marge! The controls and difficulty are a bit rough. It looks like you can move freely, but you actually move on a grid. If you press left or right, you move a fixed amount to stay aligned with the windows. You can only move in 4 directions, and it doesn't feel very good. Due to the fixed movement, it makes dodging what people throw at you harder than it should be. It's doable, but I ended up not liking this one as it's so easy to get knocked down. I did dodge objects, but sometimes they come from off screen with little warning, making this too luck based. You can avoid Marge Mothra by climbing to the poles on the side, but you risk being killed by a UFO, and this wastes more time than it saves. You can also go off the edge of the building as you get towards the top and fall down that way. Once you do get to the top, there's a giant King Kong version of Homer that you have to zap by timing electrifying your own body as he punches you. This might have been inspired by the music video for Deep Deep Trouble from 1990, but it does have a different design for King Kong Homer, so probably not. This idea also appears in the Season 4 Treehouse of Horror, with again a different design for King Kong Homer there. The idea of Homer being a giant ape must have been too perfect for them, so they used it multiple times. Overall, Bartzilla is a decent minigame. The idea of Simpsons characters as different kaiju is enough to carry it for me. I just wish the controls for the climbing were a bit more fluid. After figuring out these 2 games, I was able to take my D grades I was earning before and turn them into Cs. Once you earn a C grade, you get a more positive ending. Rather than everyone in the family hating you, Homer and Bart are happy with the C grade, with Marge more indifferent. Part of me starting to earn a C grade was also doing better in Windy World. I found out that you could use watermelon seeds to destroy these walking TVs, which sometimes would spawn in a page. My playthroughs were starting to be ended by being turned into a frog by Lisa, and then not being able to find a grandma to switch me back. The random nature of Windy World can be annoying. It can take ages before you find a page, or any type of power-up that might be useful. You can get really lucky and have pages spawn quickly, or get stuck in a loop with so much spawning in and attacking you without anything good happening. At this stage, I was able to earn 5 of the pages needed to beat the game. 1 from Bartman, 1 from Bart's Bloodstream, 1 from Itchy and Scratchy, and 2 from Bartzilla. That leaves 2 more minigames that I needed to conquer to get the final 3 pages. This means it's finally time to return to the Indiana Jones minigame that I couldn't figure out when I first started playing the game. The game is called Temple of Maggie, and you have to hop across the pillars to get to the end and find a page. There's 2 areas to go through, so 2 pages that you can earn by beating this one. This game is the hardest one to figure out what's going on and what you need to do. It's grid-based movement, and you need to jump on the pillars and make sure to avoid the pillars that have flames coming from them, as it means you'll fall if you jump on them. Jumping on pillars lowers them, and the flames appear once the pillars are too low. As well as avoiding the low pillars, you have to jump on the right pillars, as lowering one pillar raises another one. Meanwhile, these devils will appear and you have to whip them before they knock you backwards and potentially onto a low pillar. It's surprisingly difficult to know which route you need to take here. The first mistake I was making was that I was going too fast. You can move very fast across these pillars if you want to, but that's a bad idea as it's easy to accidentally land on a low pillar you didn't see. You need to take your time, but there's this weird pressure to not go slow that I was feeling. If you slow down, you realise that there's no logic to which pillars when jumped on raises other pillars. There's so many pillars to jump on and no pattern that I could see to tie together where you should be going. Jumping on a pillar will always raise the same pillar that it's connected to, but there's no logic to which pillar raises which other pillar. It feels like it's meant to be a puzzle to solve, but it ends up being randomly jumping around hoping that a path clears up. You can even screw yourself over when landing on a pillar, as you can be surrounded by low pillars with no way to get out. The flames are meant to be a clear way to know when a pillar is too low, but sometimes they just don't appear, so you can jump on a pillar you thought was safe as there was no flames, only to fall. Then there's the Maggie statues. You either have to quickly jump past them and risk falling, or try and find a specific pillar to jump on to trigger the pacifier so you can get past. This game didn't make much sense already with the pillars, but avoiding the pacifiers was something I couldn't get my head around. Sometimes they would trigger, sometimes not. The angle that they're placed at makes it really hard to know when they will fire and what they're aiming at without trial and error. With the way this game is structured, you will randomly get a chance to play Temple of Maggie at some point in a playthrough, get a couple of tries of it, die, have no idea what happened, only to play other minigames and never really get a sense of what that game was all about. I couldn't beat this, so in order to figure it out, I started making sure it was the first minigame I played. I started the game from the beginning, got the first page, picked the orange door if it was there to play Temple of Maggie, and if it's not, then reset the game and try again. Playing the game over and over again is the only way to figure it out and start putting together how you should approach it. Even doing this, it can still be unclear what to do. I got stuck on the second section of this minigame, and there was only one thing left for me to do to solve it. I had to watch playthroughs of the game online to get some tips. By doing this, I found out critical information to do with the Maggie pacifiers. They trigger based on camera position, and they give you the ability to scroll the camera in this game. It means you can go close to where the statues are, scroll the camera without moving yourself at all, and it will trigger these traps. This trick in this minigame as a whole is so unreasonable. There's no logic to triggering the pacifiers that you can tap into. How are people supposed to figure this out normally? How is it fair to have a grid-based puzzle platforming section which is overly difficult in this game? I haven't even talked about the devils properly. They take forever to move, and the whip collision to take them out is all over the place. The whip is unresponsive and sometimes doesn't work. With enough patience and knowing the tricks to the Temple of Maggie, this is beatable, but it's miserable playing this one. For the second video in a row, I'm putting a grid-based minigame into the Simpsons video game Hall of Shame. It's truly deserved. I had to restart so many playthroughs due to this one awful minigame. I was eventually able to beat Temple of Maggie, and that leaves one final page, which is actually another Itchy and Scratchy level. After beating the first level for Itchy and Scratchy, the door for the minigame will appear again, only this time you have a different level to beat. This one's a bit more surreal. Same premise as the first level, but there are these giant Itchy and Scratchy heads in the doors that attack you. These freaked me out when I first saw them. How enlarged they looked was really unsettling. Most of the locations in this level are the same as the first, just remixed with different enemies and a fire boss at the end, which is surprisingly easy. Like the first level, I don't really enjoy this one, but you can cheese it by figuring out the correct spots to stand in. Getting past this Scratchy tongue though is annoying. The jump barely functions in this minigame. And with that, it's finally time to put everything I've learned all together into one beautiful playthrough. We've been getting more and more pages each time, and we want to increase our grade to the max, which is an A+. That means beating all the minigames, getting all the 8 pages, and also making sure we have a score of at least 120,000. To make this happen, I picked up a few more tricks to help me survive in the Windy World. You can move the camera with L and R, so when you're going through Windy World you can scroll the screen and you get much more time to react to things coming at you. Also, when using the bubble gum, if you hold Y, you can directly control the gum so you can get multiple Z's at once, or if you didn't align your shot up properly, you can move the gum to where you want it to go. With a bit of luck, it's actually quite easy to build up a lot of health in Windy World. It just takes practice dealing with the bad controls and properly understanding how everything works. Temple of Maggie is the hardest minigame, so I continued to reset the game until it was the first one to come up, and if I failed it, I restarted and tried again. In my first playthrough where I was able to beat Temple of Maggie, I did badly in the other minigames and failed 4 separate times. I ended up with a massive score, but missed 2 pages and ended up with a B+. The run only ended because the pages in Windy World stopped spawning. I spent a literal 10 minutes going up and down Windy World and wasn't able to find any pages until I eventually died. This could have been a bug, I could have been unlucky, but it feels like there's a limit to how many pages you can find. The second time I beat Temple of Maggie, things went much better. I built up a lot of health in Windy World and didn't fail any of the minigames. I left Itchy and Scratchy until last, and luckily there's a trick in this minigame to increase your overall score. The furnace boss at the end of the second level shoots fire at you, and they can be taken out for 100 points each. These spawn indefinitely, so you can stand there as long as you like and grind up your score. Without this trick, getting 120,000 would be insane to do, but luckily there's this workaround. This turned out to be the run. After grinding out the points I needed, I beat the boss and got the final page. This time when seeing Bart asleep at his desk, light starts entering the room. We see "The End" written on Bart's homework, and we get the family scene showing Bart getting an A+. Everyone is happy, apart from Lisa, who looks more shocked than anything, and that takes us to the credits. It's a bit of a disappointment for the true ending, but it felt really good to get to this point and finally see that A+ for myself. Despite all the problems and issues with the game, it was surprisingly satisfying overcoming them and putting it all together to get the best ending. I wish there was more here, but I ended up really enjoying getting to this point. The journey was painful at times, but it felt worth it when it was all said and done. So that's Bart's Nightmare. We have another Simpsons game that when you first start playing, it's confusing and overly difficult. I wouldn't blame anyone who played this for 5 minutes and then stopped. There's so many roadblocks early on due to not understanding how the game works and the issues with the controls. It's easy to hit a game over without fully understanding what's going on. If you're the right type of person, someone who enjoys playing older games that are all about getting to the end in one run, then there is something here to enjoy. The amount of content is pretty limited, but each playthrough pans out differently due to the random nature of Windy World and the order you play the minigames. The grade system is simple, but it gives you a tangible sense of progression compared to just being high score based. There's no big payoff for this system, but playing the game, learning all about it, and improving your grade is fun. I like the Bartman minigame, and Bart's Bloodstream and Bartzilla aren't too bad. There are definitely gameplay problems which stop it from being a great game. The controls needed to be better, and basic elements of the game needed to be less opaque, like how to interact with the homework pages to access the levels. Temple of Maggie and Itchy and Scratchy are both just bad. Even after finding out the tricks to beat them, they're not fun to play. On another positive note though, there's a real strangeness and creativity to Bart's Nightmare. We get a fully realised flying Bartman level, Bart as Godzilla taking on Homer as King Kong, and they even go more abstract with Bart blowing up viruses. The weirdness can hurt the game, as it feeds into the confusing feeling when first playing, but it also really makes it stand out. It doesn't attempt to one-to-one recreate the show, but it offers something unique that fits well for a Simpsons video game. If you can tolerate some old school video game difficulty, then I would recommend this to any Simpsons fan. For ranking Bart's Nightmare, it's going to go at number 2, between The Simpsons Arcade and Krusty's Funhouse on the NES. Bart's Nightmare is better than any Imagineering game, so that puts it quite high on the list. The main question was, is it better than Krusty's Funhouse? Both games can be frustrating, with Bart's Nightmare's controls in certain minigames being awful, and Krusty's Funhouse with its game over system and breakable levels. I think I like Krusty's Funhouse gameplay more, as there's lots of puzzles and levels in that game that are fun to figure out and beat. There's lots of levels that aren't, but I find the rat killing premise to be a good one when the level design is solid. This ranking is all about what are the best Simpsons games though, and as a Simpsons game, Bart's Nightmare comes out on top. Krusty's Funhouse is a reskin of an existing game, while Bart's Nightmare is filled with content built around The Simpsons. That fact makes it more deserving of being higher on the list than Krusty's Funhouse. We only have one other version of Bart's Nightmare to look at, and that's the Genesis and Mega Drive port. It was released in 1993, I believe in August of that year, although different places online list different months. On the face of things, it's a typical SNES to Genesis port. There's a few visual changes, the music sounds different, but it's the same basic game. You drop into Windy World and you have to find pages to complete the same minigames as before. When checking it out, it didn't take long to realise that this is a much worse version of Bart's Nightmare. It's not one big change that makes this game worse. In fact, they try to improve the game in some ways. Like, now there are more blue Z's so you have more health to pick up, and in Temple of Maggie, Maggie's pacifier is animated to make it stand out more so it's easier to avoid. The Bloodstream minigame is also easier to control. You're not as heavy so you can move and turn quicker. There are other changes though that really hurt the game. In Windy World, the pages don't spawn as often. You find the first one easily and the second one usually isn't too bad, but any pages after that can feel impossible to find. Windy World by itself was never that fun, so making the player spend more time here makes the game much less fun as a whole. It's so tedious and frustrating when you spend 5 minutes in Windy World without finding a page when you've only found 2 so far. The SNES version is more generous with the spawning, or at least you don't get stuck in Windy World like this as often. The game runs better overall in the Genesis and feels more responsive, which normally would be nice, but it makes the game harder. You get less time to react to things, so it's easier to get hit. It's almost too smooth, like the minigames weren't designed with this better performance in mind. There are issues unique to each minigame as well, like the collision in the Itchy and Scratchy minigame is a mess. It can be really hard to hit enemies. The Bartman level, the best level in the SNES version, is a noticeable downgrade gameplay wise. It again runs too smoothly, but you also can't fire the slingshot as fast, the camera doesn't scroll properly making it feel claustrophobic at times, and the angles that you can fly at feel more limited. Bartzilla is now really hard for some reason. The helicopters are more aggressive, so I found myself dying in the easiest minigame from the SNES version. These changes add up in a way that makes this port hard to enjoy. This game is an example of how delicate the balancing of a video game can be, and how it doesn't take much to upset that balance and make a game awful. The original version of Bart's Nightmare had its problems, but you can learn that game and get better at it and end up with something quite satisfying and sometimes fun. On the Genesis, they messed with the original game to the point where that experience doesn't exist here, and the game completely collapses in on itself. Despite knowing the SNES version well enough to get an A+, and the Genesis one being the same game, I could only get Ds here because it's strangely tougher. I was playing the Genesis version on an emulator, and when I played the Mega Drive version on actual hardware, I did have a bit more luck. I was able to complete the Bartzilla level, although the climb was an absolute nightmare, and finding the pages was a bit easier. The Mega Drive version is still bad though. Playing that version didn't change my mind on this Sega port. One weird thing about the Mega Drive port though, is that Windy World has different music on the Mega Drive than it does in the Genesis. It's not just slowed down as it's running slower on PAL, I swear it's a different song. Another thing to mention about the Genesis version are the control changes. The SNES has 4 face buttons and shoulder buttons, and Bart's Nightmare uses them all. The regular Genesis controller only has 3 face buttons and no shoulder buttons, so they had to remap the controls. It's mostly okay, but to move the camera you have to hold a button while pressing left or right to scroll. It's more awkward than using shoulder buttons, but these are controls you can get used to, they're functional. I was expecting to rank the SNES and Mega Drive versions of Bart's Nightmare in the same spot, but this is going to have to go much lower. I'm going to rank it underneath the best versions of Bart vs. the Space Mutants and Bart vs. the World. I'd rather play those games than this. The creativity and weirdness of the original remains intact here, but they messed with the gameplay and made a more punishing game, and it's punishing to the point where it's not enjoyable anymore. If you're gonna play Bart's Nightmare, make sure it's the SNES one. It was nice to finally go back and look at the biggest Simpsons game on the SNES with Bart's Nightmare. Ignoring the Genesis version, I did overall enjoy what I played, but it feels like a case of being so close yet so far. It has variety and creativity, although arguably House of Weirdness did some of these ideas better, and the game grew more fun the more I played it. I can see myself as a kid playing this a lot. It's a game that you can throw yourself at over and over again and get something out of it. I like this game. It just falls short in a few areas that stop it from being all that good. In some ways, it does live up to being that big 16-bit Simpsons game. It has the presentation, the ideas, and takes the characters from the show and runs with them. It's almost a great Simpsons game, but it couldn't quite get there with its gameplay problems, from the jumping and windy world to Temple of Maggie being a mess. It's a step forward from the Imagineering games, and I think it does deserve to be remembered. It just didn't take that big step forward to put it in the same class as the Simpsons arcade. Between Bart's Nightmare and Krusty's Funhouse, things were better on the SNES for the Simpsons than on the NES, but not as much as the fans ultimately deserved. And that's Bart's Nightmare added to the list. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this look at Bart's Nightmare, please consider giving the video a like or leaving a comment below. I'll see you next time for Bartman meets Radioactive Man. With this being the last Simpsons game made by Imagineering, things may get a bit emotional. Those emotions most likely being happiness and joy.